Welcome back, everybody. I am the programmer, and I'm here to teach you everything you need to know about coding to actually get a job. Well, in the last video, I told you that we're going to learn variables and data types in the next video. And here we are. It's a birthday special this time. So, if you're ready, sit back, put on your favorite tank top, grab yourself some steroids. Nah, just kidding, don't do that. Grab yourself a protein shake, and let's get started. Okay, so in the last video, we wrote our very first code, and we executed that. We wrote our own console log messages. And if you remember how we did that, it was by going to any page you like, going to inspect, going to the console, and there we go. Again, we're going to clean up the console with console.clear. Don't forget the semicolon, and there we go. Now we're starting off with a nice, clean console. So, data types and variables. What are they exactly? Well, let's start off with variables. When you're writing code, you don't just want to write stuff at the moment, right? When I'm typing console.log and I'm saying something like hello world, right? And I'm executing this, it just says that. If I have a program that says hello world a bunch of times, but then I want to change it, I don't want it to say hello world, then I would have to change it at many places. But let's say I have a line of code that could save a piece of that data. This is what we call variables. And I'm just going to show you, and then it becomes very clear on what a variable is exactly. So, what we do first is we're going to use the word let, right? This is letting JavaScript know that we're going to define a variable. And there you're going to give your variable a fitting name. In this case, you can just call it hello world. Doesn't really matter. It can be hi message. The name really doesn't matter. But in this case, we're going to set it equal. This is why we use the equal to sign. Just one equal to sign. We're going to use more equal to signs in the future. But right now, when you're defining a variable, you use one equal to sign. And then we're going to open up our quotation marks. Could be single quotation marks, could be double quotation marks, doesn't really matter. And we're just gonna say hello world. Now, if I'm gonna close this and I can execute this, doesn't really do anything right now. But if I'm going to say now console.log and I'm going to open these parentheses, and instead of typing hello world, I'm just going to say hi message, and I'm going to close this semicolon and execute this, it's going to say hello world. It's going to use the variable that we were ascribing previously, right? So you might say, okay, well, this is pretty cool and all, but what's so great about this? Let's say you have a bunch of console logs, which you probably won't have in a code. But let's just say for the argument right now, we have a bunch of console logs that need to be executed. But then you think, you know what? I don't want my hi message to be hello world. I want it to be something else. Now you can go back and change that. But what we can do right now is say hi message and then reassign a different value to be, let's just say hi. Right? Now, if I'm going to execute this, and I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to say hi message again, and execute this, the message is going to be hi. It's not going to be hello world anymore. And this is very good, because we only have to go to one place to change what the output is going to be like, right? So this is what we call assigning, right? When we first make our variable, this is called initializing, we assign a message to this variable, and later on, when we're calling this message up again, and we're using an equal sign, we are reassigning it a different value. That's why at first it's going to be hello world, then you're telling it, wait a second, change this to hi, and then your hi message is going to be hi instead of hello world. Now, let's say you don't want to change it, right? You want to make sure that you assign it once in your code, right? You define it once at the top of your code or whatever, and you want to make sure that as the code gets longer and longer, you don't want it to be even able to reassign. It's something that should be constantly the same. Well, instead of let, we're going to use const. So this refers to a constant. A constant is something that doesn't change. And I'm going to demonstrate that right now. So let's say I'm going to make a constant called hello message. And I'm just going to make it say hello, bro. And I'm going to execute this, and I'm going to say console log hello message. And I'm going to execute this as well, just press on enter, and it's going to say hello, bro, exactly like we expected to. However, if now I decide to say, now wait a second, I want to reassign it somewhere down the line, in a later part of the code, and I'm going to say hello message, and I'm going to say hello sis. I'm going to reassign to that. We're going to get an error message. It's gonna say uncaught type error, assignment to constant variable. So what it's telling you, it's saying, nah, you've already assigned this constant, so you're not going to be able to reassign this again. And this is exactly what we want. Why do we want this? Well, it's pretty easy. We don't want to accidentally change something about our code when it should stay unchanging. Because sometimes our coding files can get pretty big, and in the midst of it, we might reassign something down the line which we shouldn't reassign. This is how to prevent that. This makes sure that whatever you initially assign stays the same. It stays constant. That's why we call it a constant. Now there's another variable type that we can use, but we shouldn't, namely var. So why shouldn't we use var? Well, it's outdated. I don't even need to tell you. I'm just gonna not tell you because no modern JavaScript developer still actually uses var. At least not a lot. Like 99.9% of the time, there's no reason to use var because it sucks. It's outdated. So what you need to remember, and this is the important part, if you want to have a variable that you want to be able to change over time and reassign different values to, use let. If you want to create a variable that stays constant and you don't want to change over time, use const. Easy. Simple. Now, what else can we assign to a variable? We talked about numbers the last time. And if you remember, we talked about the question, why is it that if you're using a text message that you have to provide some quotation marks, but if you're assigning a number, you don't have to assign quotation marks? Well, this is when we talk about data types. There are a couple different data types, and I'm going to teach you all the most important ones today. So, the first one is what we call a string. This is, to put it simply, any text message. So, if I'm making a new data type called string, it's not a good name, by the way. Don't call your variable string. And if I'm assigning this is a string, and I'm going to say console.log string, it's going to say this is a string, right? Again, don't call your variable string. That's a very bad name, and I will explain that in a future episode. But just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to show you exactly what these things are. So a string is just a text message. And you can combine multiple strings at once. So remember, we still have a variable called hi message. We can combine the two. We can put one after the other. This is what we call concatenating a string. And how we do that is by simply saying console log, and we're going to say string plus hi message. And it's going to give us this is a string and hi right next to each other, right? So we can put different strings after each other using a plus sign. Again, we call this concatenation. Now it's a fancy term, and it gets used quite a lot. You actually need to know what that means, right? So whenever it says, oh, you need to concatenate that string, you're like, wait, what does that mean? Oh yeah, plus sign, right? It's easy. It's easy. So, but we can also assign numbers to a variable. So if I say let number, also in this case, don't name your variables numbers. This is a bad name. Don't call it number. Call it something else. Call it something more descriptive. But this is a tutorial for a future lesson. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. This is just a demonstration. And this time, we don't have to put any quotation marks here. We can just say 6, for example. Close this, and there you have initialized your number 6. So if I'm going to say console.log number, it's going to return the number 6 without any quotation marks. Why is that? Well, it's because you're defining a different data type. Different data types are defined in different ways. Because let's say you want to have a text message where a number is included, but not as an actual number, but as a part of a message. And I'm going to demonstrate why. So let's say we have another number. Let's say we're going to have number 2. And number 2 is going to be 9. So right now, if we want to concatenate number and number 2, you might remember how we do that. You're going to say, well, of course, we're going to say, well, number plus number 2, and that should give us 69, right? Well, let's see. Got number plus number 2. We're going to close this off, semicolon, and nope, it's not 69. It's 15, because it's actually operating like a calculator right now. You can do some math with JavaScript right now. At this point, you can do plus, you can do minus, you can divide things, you can multiply things with numbers. You can't do that with strings. Now, if I would define this number as a string, all I would have to do is say, let's say number 3. All I would have to do is put quotation marks. So instead of just putting the number, I'm just going to put quotation marks. So I'm going to use the exact same example. We're going to have number 6. I've got the semicolon there. Don't forget. And I'm going to have number 4. And this is going to be 9. So right now, if I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to do number 3 plus number 4, and I'm going to concatenate those two strings, then Now we have 69. Now we have 69. So this is the big difference. This is why we use quotation marks for strings, right? Text. I'm not going to call it text anymore. Now you have learned what a string is. A string is a piece of text. So from now on, in all episodes, I'm going to refer to these data types as strings, because now you should know what that means. And numbers, we don't use quotation marks. So this is why we do that. Next question. What other data types do we have? Well, we have something called a Boolean. What is a Boolean? Well, I'm glad you asked. A Boolean is a condition that can either be true or false. That's it. A Boolean is simply saying true or false. If I'm saying let, and I'm gonna say is buff, and I would set this to true. Also, you don't need any quotation marks for booleans either, right? No quotation marks for booleans, otherwise it becomes a string. And now I'm gonna say console.log is buff. It should say, well, that's true. And now if I say is bulking, this would also be true. And if I would console log this and say is bulking, again, this should be true. Now let's say next year, perhaps next spring, summer, whatever, I stop bulking and I start cutting, then I need to reassign this part and say is bulking is false. So then when I ask, yo console, am I still bulking right now? It's gonna say, nope, that's false. You're not bulking anymore. So those are the three data types you're going to use the most. There are some other data types, and since this is a birthday special, we're gonna go through those as well. So the first one you're looking at right now, it is undefined. What means undefined? Well, it's very simple. It means your variable is undefined. Let blah blah blah. And I'm not going to assign this anything. If I make a variable called blah 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 right now, and I'm not going to assign it, I'm just going to put the semicolon there and be like, well, there you go. There you go. The variable exists, but it doesn't have a string, it doesn't have a number, it doesn't have a boolean, it doesn't have anything. Doesn't have anything. If I call this variable right now, blah blah blah, it's gonna say, well, it's undefined. Buddy, if you want to do something with this, you gotta define it. So as long as you leave this variable unassigned, it's going to be undefined. And here's the last one that's actually relevant. It's going to be null. Now, null and undefined are very similar because they don't actually return a value. But one is intentional and one is unintentional. So if I'm defining a variable, I'm just putting it out there, right? I'm just putting it out there. But let's say there is a variable that I want to keep null, I just want to keep empty, I just want to keep nothing, then I put null there. For example, okay, so I have to re-record this part because we had some issues. Anyhow, so if I have the null variable and I want to apply it properly, I'm going to use the example of let, and we're going to call this variable steroids drawer. Right, steroids drawer. Because I don't have a steroids drawer. So if I'm going to say, well, here's a steroids drawer, but there's not going to be anything in there. So it's going to be null. It's always going to be empty. It's going to be nothing. Then I'm going to say this And now, if I say console.log steroids drawer, it's going to return null. It's going to be like, oh, well, here you go. These are the steroids. Oh, wait a second. There are none. It's null. So keep that in mind. And those are pretty much all the relevant data types. There's one more that we didn't really talk about because it's simply not relevant. It's called big number. It's about numbers that are so big that you would need a separate data type for them. But realistically, you're not going to use them for 99.99% of the time. So it's not even worth talking about. Just know it exists. Even if you forget that, it doesn't really matter. What is important is that you remember the variables and the data types that we talked about today. So just a quick recap. We have, in terms of variables, we have let if you want to change something down the road. We have constant if you want to keep it constant and not change it. It should be unchanging. And we have, in terms of data types, we have strings, which refer to text. We have numbers, which refer to numbers. Duh. Come on. Like I told you, it's not that difficult. It's not that complicated. We have booleans, which are either true or they are false. We have undefined, which are variables that haven't been assigned, so they're undefined. And then we have null, which are variables that refer to an empty value, which also doesn't refer to anything. Doesn't refer to anything but intentional. So keep those things in mind, and we're gonna have a lot of fun in the next episode. I am the programmer. God bless, and goodbye.